I've really written my whole life. I started writing probably when I was about 9 years old. I wrote an epic romance novel that was about 1,500 pages long called The Beautiful Cassandra, which was not about me, but was about a beautiful young heroine who escaped from a convent in 1600s England and had many adventures. And it was pretty bad, but I really enjoyed writing it. And then I went on writing many, many terrible books throughout my high school career. I wrote a terrible vampire book, and I wrote a terrible book about King Arthur. Somewhere in college, I decided that what I wanted to do was journalism. So I took a number of journalism courses, and after I graduated, I went to work for entertainment magazines. I worked for The Hollywood Reporter in Los Angeles, and after I moved to New York, I worked for the National Enquirer and the News of the World and the Weekly World News and Star Magazine. That was an interesting experience. It involved a lot of creativity, making a certain amount of things up, but it also required knowing a lot more about Paris Hilton than I necessarily wanted to know. Somewhere around the third or fourth year that I was doing that, I decided to go back to what I had originally loved doing, which was writing fiction, and I started writing City of Bones. I was drawn to the fantasy genre because I've always been a huge fantasy fan, and I'm a big believer in writing the book that you yourself personally want to read. I've read fantasy novels since I was a small girl. My father was a huge fantasy fan. He used to give me all of his books. So all of my favorite books growing up were fantasy, like Susan Cooper's Dark is Rising series and Lloyd Alexander's The Chronicles of Prydain, and of course Tolkien and Narnia. So when I first started writing, I knew immediately that I wanted to incorporate fantastical elements into the story. I got the idea for the Mortal Instruments series one day when I was downtown in the East Village. I had the idea already for the characters, and I knew how I wanted them to interact, and I knew already what kind of romance I wanted to write and what kind of character interaction I wanted there to be, but I had no magic system. And a magic system is very important to fantasy because it's the bones of the story on which you build your world. And so I was downtown in the village with a friend of mine who used to work in a tattoo shop. She's an artist, and she brought me to her old tattoo shop to look at what they call the Flash Book, which is a book of different designs of possible tattoos that you could get. And she was showing me the tattoos and the various meanings that they had. And she also showed me that once upon a time the tattoo shop had had a tradition in which the new employees would step in some of the ink and they would walk on the walls and be held up to put their footprints on the ceiling. So it looked like someone had run up and down the walls and ceilings of the tattoo shop, and I had a sudden mental image of a magical battle being fought inside the tattoo shop by people who had magical tattoos and were brandishing these arcane weapons. And I thought, well, this would be a great system on which to build magic because I really enjoy runes and rune languages. And I thought if you had runes that you could put on your own skin that would give you specific powers and abilities, that would be a fantastic magic system to use. A magic system is what we call it when we're talking about fantasy writing, when it's a way of explaining how magic works in your universe. So in my universe, magic works via a book called the Grey Book, in which there are a number of different patterns and images, and those patterns and images are magical. And when you apply them to your skin or you apply them to various objects, they work as a conduit to give those objects power. There are all sorts of different kinds of magic systems that you can use. Some of them can be based on language. In some, the magic system is mental. You just have to think about it, and the magic will come to you. For instance, in the Dark is Rising books, the magic comes from the Old Ones, who are sort of an old race of magical creatures who inhabit this world. And in other books, for instance, magic can be drawn off of the energy of other human beings. City of Bones is the first book in the Mortal Instruments series, and it's about a 15-year-old girl named Clary. And Clary is an ordinary girl living in Brooklyn, in New York. She actually lives in my old neighborhood. And she one day goes to a club downtown and encounters a bunch of young teenagers about her age who are covered with these tattoos and sporting these magical weapons, and they kill another boy. And she is horrified by this, and they are equally horrified that she can see them because runes that they have on their skin should protect them from being able to be seen by ordinary human beings. But Clary is, of course, not ordinary, and the boy that they killed isn't a boy. It's a demon, and they are demon hunters. And she gets drawn into their world after her mother disappears, and she herself is attacked by a demon, and she learns that there is this magical underworld of Manhattan called Downworld, which is split into warring factions. There are warlocks, fairies, werewolves, and vampires, and then there are these shadow hunters, who are the demon hunters who keep everybody in line. And she comes to find out that her mother has absconded with an extremely important article of shadow hunter lore, which is called the Mortal Cup, and everyone is looking for it. And she has to find the cup in order to find and save her mother. The story continues in City of Ashes when the second of these mortal instruments, the mortal sword, goes missing. Clary's mother is still out of commission in this installment, but her father, Valentine, who is the one who took both the cup and the sword, is on the rampage. He's killing downworlders and draining their blood. So they're finding the bodies of dead werewolves and vampires and fairies around the city. So the downworlders are blaming each other and starting what looks like a civil war, while Clary and her friends are trying to hunt down Valentine, figure out what he's doing, and get the mortal sword back before everything goes to hell in a handbasket. I am going on tour for City of Ashes. Starting April 6th, I'll be visiting New York and Phoenix, Arizona, Los Angeles, which is actually where I grew up, so I'm excited to be going back, and San Francisco. So I'm very excited to be going on tour and sharing City of Ashes with people and meeting the people who read City of Bones and are so excited for the next one. That's going to be great. So I hope you'll come out and see me. And you can find all the information about my book tour and whatever other upcoming events I'm doing on my website, which is www.mortalinstruments.com.